My name is Mo, and I am so glad that you have joined us this week. Where are you watching from? You can access our weekly online gatherings posted every single Saturday on the IGTV section of our Instagram account at Refuge SHPK or our Refuge Heartland Alliance YouTube channel. But that is not all. We have a brand new live platform at refugeshpk.online.church. So you can now join us live every single Saturday at 7 p.m. If you are on the live platform, there are a bunch of ways that you can interact. So let's take a minute to break those down. First of all, you can watch our services live premiere weekly with the rest of the Refuge community. It is not in person, but it is a way to connect that we've never had before. You can also talk to one another in the chat or hit the request prayer button to speak with our host one-on-one. There's also a note section with links and resources for your reference during the sermon and a Bible section so that you can follow along where we're studying, whether you have a Bible with you or not. Are you connected at our Refuge community on social media? We post regularly on Instagram, and not just the weekly online gatherings. There are so many fun pictures, news about our community, and special events that you can be a part of. Even more exciting, every single month we have an amazing giveaway on Instagram and give out prizes and other exciting items to one lucky winner. That lucky winner could be you! Our small groups are back and meeting weekly on Zoom, Monday nights at 7 p.m. for grades 7 through 12. Are you a part of a small group? If not, this is one of the best ways that we can stay together no matter what the situation is that's going on in our world. These past few months, we have been experiencing a lack of community like never before. Just because you're experiencing physical distancing right now doesn't mean that you have to stay isolated from community. Now we are going to transition into a time of worship where we sing a few songs and just show God how much we love Him through music. Because we're not gathered together in person, this is pre-recorded. It may be awkward or challenging to connect with worship. I would encourage you to try and find a way of worship that makes sense to you. Whether it is to close your eyes, to let the words of these songs just speak to your heart, or find a quiet place where you can feel comfortable to sing along. This is a time for you to spend between just you and God. You may even find it easier to worship when no one else is watching. So, let's worship.
God, we thank you that we get to be here and we get to worship you, God, even if it's from a distance, that we get to be together and just glorify your name together. So I pray that as we worship, that our hearts would remember why we are here and why we're singing, God. We thank you for this time. Amen.
Fail me now in the way
wide gates of heaven. Jesus, King of all the earth, let the heavens proclaim your word. The one true God defeated the grave. We join with angels and sing your praise. Overthrown is the power of darkness. All darkness lost its hold when you came with your kindness and your goodness, and your love breaks the chains off my heart, off my mind, and your power sets free all the captives, and you bring peace. Jesus, King of all the earth, let the heavens proclaim your worth. The one true God defeated the grave. We join with angels and sing your praise. Jesus, King of all the earth, let the heavens proclaim your word. The one true God defeated the grave. We join with angels and sing your praise. Oh, my soul will sing. No, my soul will praise you. No, my soul will sing. No, my soul will praise you. No, my soul will sing. No, my soul will praise you. Jesus, King of all the earth, let the heavens proclaim your word. The one true God defeated the grave. We join with angels and sing your praise. Jesus, King of all the earth, let the heavens proclaim your word. The one true God defeated the grave. We join with angels and sing your praise.
Hey there, Refuge. My name is Sydney, for those of you who may not know me, and I'm one of the staff members here in our student community. Thanks for tuning into this week's online service. Whether you're joining us every week or if this is your first time tuning in, I am so excited to have you here. And if you're watching the service live and haven't had a chance, we'd love for you to send us a hey in the chat. Today, we're going to be talking about the Bible, Jesus, you, and how all of it fits together in one nice picture. We're going to be talking about a topic that might hit home a little bit more for some of you than for some others. But I want you to know that if you have any questions, prayer requests, or just want someone to chat with about what you're going through, please don't be afraid to reach out. We would absolutely love the chance to chat with you. You can reach us by shooting us a message on our social media accounts or at our email, which is refuge@heartlandalliance.ca. If you're watching live, you can talk to our service host privately by clicking the Request Prayer button. We are heading into week 3 of our series called The Missing Pieces. This series is looking at a particular section of the Bible where Jesus is teaching us about what his idea of what a community should look like. We are all living in very different communities, whether you look at your neighborhood, your friend group, the school you attend, or something similar. But no matter which community you might be thinking of, there can often be something missing from it. In this passage we're going to look at here soon, Jesus goes through a piece of what we should have within this ideal community. Last week, Pastor Wade took us through a bit of an introduction to what the series is all about, the Beatitudes. We're going to read through them again here today when we can then zone in on the particular piece we're going to be talking about in this sermon. So let's read. If you have a Bible app or a Bible, you can turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 1 to 12. If you're watching live, then go ahead and use the Bible tab at the bottom of your screen, or feel free to just read along with the words on the screen. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when the people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So today we're going to be focusing on Matthew 5:4, which says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Now, let's break this down a little bit. We're going to start with the very first word mentioned in this verse. It's the word blessed. If you were here last week, you probably remember the discussion that Pastor Wade had talking about this word. If you weren't here, here's a little bit of a refresher. Blessed means to be happy. God is the truly happy one, as we humans can receive this blessing, this incredible level of happiness from God. God wants each and every one of us to have this divine joy that comes directly from Him. Now, this isn't just some feeling that is fleeting. We can find happiness in a multitude of ways. But we need to understand that this particular kind of happiness can only come from God. It's an inner joy that is consistent and doesn't go away, no matter what life throws at you. It is fueled by God, and it inspires others to know Him through you. The things that we can seek in order to fill us with happiness are temporary things. They aren't long-lasting, and oftentimes they end up leading us towards disappointment yet again. It is only in Jesus that we can find true happiness. Now, let's head into the next part of this verse, where it says, "are those who mourn." I can definitely understand the irony of hearing the words, "blessed are those who mourn," or if you were to replace the word with, "happy are those who mourn." It definitely seems a little faulty. So let's talk about this for a minute. When you think of the word mourning, what do your thoughts typically come into your mind? Take a minute here and jot your thoughts down. From what I could find on the internet, there are two common definitions of what mourning can mean. One is to feel or show deep sorrow or regret for someone or their death, typically by following conventions such as the wearing of black clothes. The second one is feel regret or sadness about the loss or disappearance of something. Typically, the first definition is thought about in the case of someone close to you passing away. This could be a family member, a friend, or someone you sort of knew. It could even be due to a pet that has been around for years. I remember when we lost our dog Aspen, I sobbed for more days than I'd like to admit. I also fell into this state of mourning when several people in my life passed away, one of them being my dad. This second definition can be seen more in the things that we have lost. Many of us have been in mourning since the loss of our normal lives since COVID-19 entered the world. Plans had to change, lifestyles needed adjusting, wedding plans were all but thrown out, graduations canceled, and the churches had to adjust how they do things. It was hard to go from what we all loved and knew so well into this time where words like quarantine and isolation were tossed casually into conversation. This idea of mourning is not a new concept. In fact, there are over 122 mentions of mourning in the Bible, primarily in the Old Testament. Even Jesus, who the Bible teaches us was sinless and blameless, he mourned. A quick conclusion here would be to assume that there is nothing wrong with mourning. It's a piece of who we are, and it's an important piece of Jesus and what he included in the Beatitudes. Now, the world we live in often seems to shun this idea of mourning. Society equates mourning with a weakness that if you're actually going through something, you need to be strong, and you shouldn't engage in this idea of mourning. You might be thinking, yeah, sure they do. But mourning is all crying and puffy eyes and runny noses and people always telling you things you don't want to hear anyway. And this isn't always true. Mourning can take on so many different looks in a person's life. Take me, for example. In 2012, when we had to put our dog Aspen down because she got cancer, I sobbed. In 2013, when two of my best friend's brothers died in a car crash on a rainy day, I screamed into my pillow at night and bawled at their funeral. In 2014, when my grandma passed away from cancer, it wasn't a huge shock, but I was still full of sadness and tried not to let those tears fall down my face as I made the slideshow for her funeral. When later in 2014, my dad passed away from a motorcycle accident, I went into shock. I couldn't cry, I told myself that I didn't have time to mourn because I was in grade 12, I had diplomas coming up, I had to make sure my siblings were going to be okay. And honestly, I didn't properly mourn my dad's death until about 4 years later. I had believed that mourning was going to make me weak, that it was going to show other people that I couldn't deal, that I couldn't move on properly, that I was giving into my own sadness rather than supporting my family through it. So I took on that role and stuffed my feelings way down deep where no one could ever find them. But that's not okay. We should embrace our mourning and tackle it head on. Don't shy away from it, but work through it. If you're struggling with some sort of mourning in your life, whether it's to do with the loss of someone or something, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love nothing more than to be there for you. Now, back to what we're talking about here today. There is a third definition of what mourning can look like in our lives. It's to feel or show deep sorrow or regret for the sin that has entered into our lives. This is the definition that is likely being discussed within the passage. Just like last week's beatitude about poor, both the words poor and mourning are addressing a spiritual peace in our lives. Let's also take a moment here to define the word sin. It might be a word that you may not be familiar with, or you might have heard it your whole life and aren't entirely sure about what it means. Sin is actually a quite complex definition, but for the sake of simplicity, you can look at sin as not doing what God has said is right in the Bible, but is also rebellion against God and his ways. In the Bible, we can often see that the poor, the sick, despised, and the weak are always the first people to turn to Jesus. Those who are wealthy and powerful and often struggle to grasp and hold on to the idea of Jesus. Why do you think that is? We can often find ourselves acknowledging how good our circumstances are, and this allows for us to fall into an area of pride in believing that what we have without Jesus is enough, that we are content with where we're at and that nothing needs to change in our lives. As Pastor Wade mentioned last week, we need to humble ourselves and be willing to put ourselves into a position where we can receive Jesus and put our faith in him. We're all sinners, and Jesus was sent to save each one of us. Remember, sin is not doing what God has said is right in the Bible, but it's also a rebellion against God. The mourning that is being talked about here is the acknowledgement of both the sin in our lives and also the sin that is out there in the world around us. This definitely doesn't mean that we should be out there judging others for the sin that they have in their lives. We aren't perfect either. We need to be able to acknowledge our own brokenness. This is the place where we want to go out of telling people about Jesus. 18th century missionary David Brainerd wrote in his personal journal, "My soul is exceedingly melted and bitterly mourned over my exceeding sinfulness and vileness." Wow, that seems like a lot. But I think again, back to my own personal experience of losing my dog in 2012, I couldn't stop the uncontrollable tears from falling. This is what mourning is like when we are mourning our sin. There is a regular breaking of our hearts when sin enters our lives where we should mourn. This is also how God feels about our sin. Not just the people who are happy and out there living their greatest lives. Jesus came to save those who are in mourning too. Mourning over the fact that we have sinned and that our lives are not perfect. This leads perfectly into the third part of our verse. Blessed are those who mourn. Happy are those who mourn. You could almost say, happy are the unhappy, but then why are they happy? For they shall be comforted. Whenever we are in a state of mourning, no matter which form it might be, you always find yourself wanting or needing to be comforted. Some people find this comfort aspect in other people, while some don't. Some people feel comforted by having some time alone. Others feel comforted by food or alcohol or drugs. What we need to acknowledge is that true comfort comes from God and God alone. Similar to the happiness aspect that we talked about earlier. None of these other comforts will ever measure up to anything that God can provide for us. All of these other worldly comforts are fleeting and again can lead us down the path of disappointment. Jesus wants us to understand that he is the only way for true, genuine happiness and comfort. Doesn't the idea of this perfect level of happiness and comfort bring you so much peace? That no matter what you're going through, God's got you, and even through times where they might be hard, he's reaching out his hand towards you. He will bring you comfort. I don't know about you guys, but that sounds pretty good to me. Another note about this is that the Bible never promises an easy life for Jesus' followers. In fact, it mostly guarantees that with Jesus as a part of your life, things might even get more complicated. But over and over, it guarantees that God will be with us. He will give us what we need, and He will be our comforter. Now, what are some ways you can choose to be blessed through your mourning? How will you find comfort? Here are some questions I want you to answer. Do I want this level of being blessed? What are some things that I seek out for happiness and joy in my life? How often do I turn to God for guidance and happiness? What are some things that I've been mourning in my life? What kind of sin have I been holding on to that I should be mourning? What kinds of things do I need to be comforted about? When I need comfort, what and who do I look to? Do you mourn for other people? Does that help to increase your desire to tell them about Jesus and His community? Some practical things you can do that might help you get yourself into the right headspace to work through some of these questions could be to pray regularly, read your Bible, talk to God with people. In the next few weeks, we're going to continue to talk about what is missing from Jesus' community that we can work on in our own lives. If you have any questions about anything that I talked about today, feel free to reach out and ask. If you're watching live, our chat will stay open after the service for about 15 minutes if you'd like to chat or have a prayer request. Have a great week, Refuge, and stay safe.
I'm so glad that you could take time this week to join us. If you're watching live, the chat will remain open for about 15 more minutes so you can catch up with those who are also tuning in. Once again, our service goes live every Saturday at 7 p.m. I'm so grateful that we can still join together virtually, even when we aren't able to meet in person. Let's stay connected. There are so many ways to stay in touch with us, so let me run through them again for you. You can follow us on social media. We are active on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you haven't already, please take a quick moment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can reach out to our team by emailing us at refuge@heartlandalliance.ca or reach out to any one of your leaders. I know that they would be so happy to hear from you. Thanks again for joining us, Refuge. See you next week.